The Veltanta Training Annex was a place of many sounds. The low hum of the power generators was a constant noise in the background. The click-clack of hard feet on metal floors came from the insect-like Jarnelians. The deep, rumbling voices of the big, rocky Grval shook the air. Light from many different stars came through the big windows. It lit up the many different species who were all here to learn the same thing, how to be better soldiers. Instructor Kthar stood at the front of the large lecture hall. He was a tall being from a warrior race called the Veltans. He had sharp scales of a deep green color and 4 dark, intelligent eyes that moved around the room. His voice was a low rumble, and small devices in the students' ears translated his words for them. He was talking about battle. A large, bright hologram floated in the air behind him. It showed little shapes of ships and soldiers moving in a pattern. The direct attack is simple. But the great warrior knows that victory often comes from the side, Kthar said, pointing at the hologram. The little ships on the display moved quickly, pinching another group between them. You must hit the enemy with speed. You must hit them with surprise. You must show them your strength and your anger. This breaks their line. But more importantly, it breaks their spirit. When the enemy is scared, the battle is already won. His 4 eyes looked over the young cadets. He saw the Jarnelians clicking their mandibles together. It was their sign of understanding and approval. He saw the big Grval nod their heavy, stone-like heads. Their faces showed excitement for the fight. This was good. This was what a warrior should feel. Then, his gaze moved to the back of the room. To the 3 humans, they were sitting together, as they always did. Their names were June, Mina, and Chul. They were the only humans in this class. June was tall and had black hair cut short. He sat very straight in his chair. His hands were still on the table in front of him. His dark eyes watched the hologram, but his face showed no feeling. Next to him, Mina was a bit smaller. She had a data pad on her desk, and her fingers would sometimes tap it quietly, making notes. Her eyes moved quickly, watching the hologram, then watching the other students, then going back to the hologram. She was watching everything, but she never spoke. On the other side was Chul. He was not as tall as June, but he was built in a solid, strong way. He sat back in his chair, looking calm and relaxed. But his eyes were also sharp and aware. They were always like this. Perfectly quiet. Perfectly still. While other cadets asked questions or argued about the best tactics, the humans just listened. They did not fidget. They did not whisper to each other. They were like 3 quiet statues in the middle of a noisy room. To Kthar, this was an insult. In his culture, a warrior's spirit was everything. You showed your interest with loud questions. You showed your understanding with strong opinions. Silence was for the weak. Silence was for those who were too scared to speak, or those who did not care. He finished his lesson about the pincer movement. Are there any questions? He asked the class. A young Veltan cadet stood up immediately. Instructor. What if the enemy sees the pincer coming and moves to counter it? Should you not then charge the center with even greater force? Kthar felt a sense of pride. A good question. Aggression is the answer. When the enemy changes, you must be more fierce, more determined. He looked toward the humans. They were just watching. Their faces were blank. Human June, Kthar said, his voice a little sharper. Do you have an opinion? Does your species not believe in the power of a decisive attack? All the other cadets turned to look at the 3 humans. The room became quiet. June looked at the instructor. His face was still calm. The tactic is sound, instructor, he said, his voice even and polite. It is a classic for a reason. Then he stopped talking. He did not add anything. He did not give an example. He just agreed in the most boring way possible and then went silent again. Kthar felt his scales tighten on his neck. It was a small sign of his irritation. This was the 3rd time this cycle he had tried to get them to talk. And this was the third time he had failed that he dismissed the class. The room filled again with the sounds of chairs moving and students talking. The three humans stood up together. They gathered their things quietly and walked toward the door without saying a word to anyone. Kthar watched them go. His assistant, a slender, bird-like Zith named Elsin, floated over to him. The Zith moved with a quiet grace. "The humans are a puzzle, are they not, instructor?" Elsin said, his voice a soft chirp. "They are an insult," Kthar rumbled. "They show no passion. No fire. How can they be soldiers? Their files say they are veterans. They fought in a war called the Cerberus Insurrection. I have never heard of it. It must have been a very small fight. A border argument. It seems it taught them to be quiet and scared instead of strong and proud." Elsin looked at his own datapad. "Their test scores are perfect, Instructor Kthar. Top of the class. They understand the material better than anyone. Understanding is not enough," Kthar said, slamming a scaled fist on his podium. The sound echoed in the now empty hall. "A warrior must have spirit. They must have the will to use that knowledge with courage and fury. These humans, they sit there. They are like empty shells." He turned to Elsin, his 4 eyes narrowed. "I will not have my class disrupted by their apathy. It sets a bad example for the others. It makes them think that silence is a virtue in a warrior. It is not." "What do you wish to do, instructor?" Elsin asked. "Schedule them for a disciplinary review. After the next simulation cycle. I will speak to them in my office. I will find out why they refuse to act like proper cadets. And if they cannot give me a good reason, I will recommend they be removed from the program. We have no room for soldiers who have no heart for the fight." Elsin made a note on his datapad. "It will be done." Kthar looked back at the door where the humans had left. He felt sure of himself. He was a famous warrior. He had led fleets into battle. He knew what a true soldier looked like, and those 3 quiet humans in the back of his class, they did not look like soldiers to him. Not at all. The next cycle brought the first major simulation. It was not a full battle, but a command exercise. The cadets were placed in pairs in separate control pods. Their task was to manage a small fleet of drone ships and capture a floating starbase from a computer-controlled enemy. The lecture hall was transformed. The seats were empty. Now, the cadets sat in enclosed pods, their faces lit by the glow of tactical screens. Their voices, giving orders and calling out reports, were piped into a central observation deck where Instructor Kthar and Elsin watched. The noise was intense. "Flanking run on the left." Now, shouted Brash, a large Velton cadet with bright red scales. His voice was a constant roar of aggression. "Enemy frigate is powering weapons. I am charging straight in. They will break before we do," yelled his partner, Vortic. Kthar listened, a low rumble of approval in his chest. This was the sound of warriors. This was passion. The holographic display showed their ships moving with bold, decisive strokes. They took losses, but they pushed forward with undeniable force. Then, Kthar's eyes moved to another pod. Pod 7. The human pod. He had to turn up the audio feed just to hear them. It was mostly silence, broken by short, quiet sentences. "Enemy is committing to the center." June's voice was calm, like he was commenting on the weather. A pause. The only sound was the gentle tap of Mina's fingers on a screen. "They are leaving their lower approach, undefended," she said, her voice soft. "Chul, send a probe." "Silent running." "Just to look," June ordered. "Acknowledged." Chul's voice was a low, solid tone. On the holographic display, a single, tiny green dot, the human probe, slipped away from their main fleet. It moved slowly, quietly, staying in the shadow of an asteroid. Brash and Vortic's noisy battle in the center of the map drew all the attention. The humans did not engage. Their main fleet drifted back, falling into a tight, defensive formation. It looked like a retreat. It looked like fear. "See?" Kthar said to Elsin, a note of triumph in his voice. "They have the same tools. The same ships. But they lack the will to use them. They are backing away from a fight. Their overall resource count is higher than Cadet Brash's," Elsin noted, looking at a different screen. "They have lost fewer ships. A warrior does not win by saving ships. He wins by crushing the enemy." Kthar retorted. Suddenly, on the display, the human probe reached the starbase. The enemy AI, realizing the threat, tried to turn its defenses. But it was too late. The humans' main fleet, which had been sitting so passively, suddenly launched a wave of targeted missiles. They did not attack the enemy ships. They attacked the starbase defensive guns and shield generators. It was a precise, surgical strike. A soft chime came from Pod 7. "Objective captured," June said, his voice still perfectly even. "They had won. They had won without a single, loud firefight. They had won by moving one small, quiet probe and then pressing a single button at the right time." Brash and Vortic were still roaring, trying to break through the enemy's main force. They didn't even know the simulation was over. Kthar was furious. This was not war. This was a trick. It was dishonorable. It had no glory. "Enough," he broadcast to all pods. Simulation concluded. Pod 7 is victorious. A moment of silence was followed by confused chatter from the other pods. Later, June, Mina, and Chol stood at ease in Instructor Kthar's office. The room was filled with weapons and banners from his many campaigns. The three humans looked small and out of place. "Instructor," June said, his tone respectful. Kthar paced behind his large, stone desk. "Your performance in the simulation was adequate," he began, his voice tight. "You completed the objective. But your method was without honor. Without spirit. You hid. You ran. You won through a technicality." The humans said nothing. Their faces were calm. "This behavior matches your silence in my classroom," Kthar continued, stopping to look at them. "You display no passion. No warrior's heart. I have read your files. You are veterans of the Cerberus insurrection. I assume it was a minor conflict. A small border dispute. It seems it taught you to be cautious instead of courageous." At the mention of Cerberus, Kthar saw a change. It was small, almost invisible. Chol's jaw tightened. His hands, held behind his back, clenched into fists for a second before relaxing. June's eyes flicked to his companions, a silent message passing between them. Mina's lips pressed into a thin line. It was the first real emotion he had seen from them. "With respect, Instructor," June said, his voice still calm but now with a harder edge. "The nature of a war is not always defined by its size." "Then define it for me," Kthar challenged, leaning forward on his desk. "Explain to me why the three of you sit in my class like you are waiting for a bus. Explain this quiet." Mina spoke this time. "We are learning, sir. We are observing. Our silence is not a lack of interest. It is focus." "Focus?" Kthar scoffed. "I see focus in a warrior's eyes when he charges the enemy. I hear it in his battle cry. I do not see it in your silent staring." He was losing his patience. Words were not working. He needed to see them break. He needed to see the fire he was sure was hidden inside them, or confirm that it was never there. "Enough talk," he said, standing up straight. "You believe your method is superior? A quiet victory? We will see. Report to the Advanced Combat Simulator. The full immersion pods. You three, as a team, will be pitted against my top cadets," Brash and Vortic, in a live-fire tactical scenario. No simple fleet command. This will be infantry combat. Urban environment. Let us see if your quiet methods hold any value when the plasma bolts are flying past your ears. He expected to see fear. Or maybe, finally, excitement. He saw neither. June simply nodded. We understand, instructor. We will be there. The three humans turned and left his office, moving with the same quiet efficiency as always. They did not look scared. They did not look angry. They looked like they were going to do a job. Kthar watched them go, more confused than ever. He had just thrown down a major challenge. He had questioned their honor and their courage. And they had accepted it like he had asked them to take out the trash. Who were these humans? The Advanced Combat Simulator was a cold, intimidating place. It was a large, circular room with three heavy, pod-like doors set into the wall. A thick window of reinforced glass looked into the control room where Instructor Kthar and Elsin stood. Inside each pod, a cadet would be immersed in a virtual world that felt completely real. Their minds would believe they were in a battle, but their bodies would be safe. June, Mina, and Chul arrived together. They did not speak. They each walked to a pod and waited for the door to open. Across the room, Brash and Vortic were doing stretches and laughing. They slapped each other on the back, their voices loud and confident. Ready for a real fight, little humans? Brash called out, his red scales seeming to glow with excitement. No more hiding behind asteroids. The humans did not look at him. They did not respond. The pod doors slid open with a hiss, and they stepped inside without a backward glance. The doors sealed shut behind them. I in the control room, Kthar grunted. Their silence is arrogance. Or focus, instructor, Elsin said softly, but Kthar ignored him. The main hologram flickered to life, showing a ruined city. Broken buildings reached for a smoky sky. Rubble filled the streets. The objective was simple: 2 teams, 1 central command node. The first team to capture and hold it for 5 minutes would win. Brash and Vortic appeared on the map as 2 bright blue dots. They spawned on the east side of the city. Almost immediately, they began to move. They ran fast and loud, their simulated boots crunching on the virtual gravel. Their communication channel was a live feed of their thoughts. Let's go straight up the main avenue. Crush anything in our path. Brash yelled. Agreed. Show them the Velton way. Vortic roared back, their dots moved in a fast, straight line towards the center of the map. The 3 human dots, colored green, appeared on the west side. They did not move. Kthar leaned forward. What are they waiting for? They are giving up the central position. Inside their pods, the humans were not idle. They were assessing. June's voice was the first to come over their quiet, private channel. Standard urban decay pattern. Multiple levels. Mina's voice followed, quick and analytical. The main avenue is a perfect kill zone. Wide sight lines, no cover. They will take it. It is the fastest route. Chul's low voice added, I am scanning the substructure. The sewer and utility tunnels are mostly intact. We have a path. It is longer. It is slower. Mark it, June said. On the holographic display, a thin, green line appeared. It did not go down the main streets. It went underground, through the dark, cramped tunnels beneath the city. It was a winding, indirect route towards the command node. Meanwhile, Brash and Vortic were halfway to the center. They encountered a simulated enemy patrol, 2 automated drone soldiers. The Velton cadets did not slow down. They opened fire with their plasma rifles, shouting with joy as the drones exploded into digital fragments. 2 down. They are no match for us. Brash cheered. They are wasting ammunition on non-essential targets, Mina observed from her pod, her voice a flat monotone. Let them, June replied. The 3 green dots began to move. They did not run. They walked, single file, into a dark hole in the ground that led to the sewers. Their dots vanished from the main surface map, only visible on the substructure overlay. Kthar frowned. Hiding again. They are afraid of a direct confrontation. Brash and Vortic reached the central plaza. The command node was a tall, glowing pillar in the middle of the open space. They ran to it. Objective secured. Beginning capture sequence. Vortic announced. A timer appeared on the hologram, counting down from 5 minutes. The humans were still underground, moving slowly through the darkness. They did not speak. The only sound from their channel was their steady breathing. With 2 minutes left on the Velton timer, June spoke a single, quiet word. Now. The green dots stopped moving. They were directly beneath the central plaza. Chul's voice was calm. Placing breaching charge on ceiling support. Structure is weak. Calculated collapse will create a funnel. Up in the plaza, Brash and Vortic were celebrating. This is too easy. Where are those quiet humans? Did they get lost? Brash laughed. Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet rumbled. A large section of the plaza floor, right behind them, collapsed into a deep, dusty hole. The entrance to the main street was now blocked by a mountain of rubble. The wide-open plaza was now a trap, with only one small, narrow exit, the hole the humans had just created. Before the dust could settle, a plasma bolt shot up from the dark hole. It was not aimed at Brash or Vortic. It hit the command node, overloading its shield for a brief second. The Velton capture timer froze and then reset to 0. They had lost control of the node. What? How? Vortic shouted, spinning around. They are below us. Brash yelled, firing his rifle wildly into the hole. From the darkness below, 3 precise shots were fired. They were not meant to kill. One hit Brash's rifle, knocking it from his hands. Another hit Vortic's leg, damaging his simulator suit and making him stumble. The third shot hit the command node again, and a new timer appeared, this one colored green. The humans had started their capture sequence. The Velton cadets were pinned. They could not rush the hole, it was a perfect defensive position. They could not escape the plaza. They were stuck. They tried to return fire, but they were shooting blindly into the dark. The humans, safe in their covered position, did not need to shoot again. They just had to wait. The green timer ticked down. 5, 4, 3, this is not a fight. This is a trick. Brash screamed in frustration, throwing down his damaged rifle. 2, 1, a soft chime echoed through the simulator. Simulation complete. Victor, Green Team. The holographic city faded away. The pod doors hissed open. Brash and Vortic stumbled out of their pods, their faces filled with anger and confusion. They had barely seen the enemy. They had not fought a real battle. They had been defeated by a hole in the ground. The humans stepped out of their pods. Their faces were calm. There was no sweat on their brows. Their breathing was even. They looked like they had just taken a quiet walk. June looked at Instructor Kthar through the control room window. He gave a small, respectful nod. Kthar did not nod back. He stood perfectly still, staring at the now blank hologram. He had seen it all. The patience. The planning. The perfect use of the environment. It was not a glorious victory. It was not a warrior's victory. But it was a total victory. They had won without a single, direct exchange of fire. He had wanted to see their spirit. He had wanted to see their fire. Now, he had seen something else. Something cold, and patient, and incredibly effective. He felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. The silence in Instructor Kthar's office was heavy and deep. The 3 humans stood at ease, their postures unchanged from the last time they were here. But everything else had changed. Kthar was no longer pacing. He was sitting behind his large stone desk, his 4 eyes fixed on them. The anger was gone from his face. It was replaced by a deep, unsettled confusion. He had watched the simulation recording 3 times. Each time, the cold, precise efficiency of the humans sent a new chill down his spine. They had not fought. They had solved the problem. They had turned the entire simulation into a simple equation, and they had found the easiest answer. This method, Kthar began, his voice much quieter than before. This is not in any training manual. This is not how the Federation fights. June looked at him, his expression calm. It is how we survived, instructor. Survived what? Kthar asked, the question bursting from him. Your files say, Cerberus insurrection. I looked it up in the galactic database. The entry is small. It calls it a localized conflict. A suppression of a rogue planetary AI. It lists the duration as 3 standard cycles. That is all. It sounds clean. It sounds simple. For the first time, Kthar saw a real crack in their calm. It was not a big thing. Mina looked down at the floor. Chol took a slow, quiet breath. June's jaw tightened, just for a moment. That is not what we called it, June said, his voice low. What did you call it? Kthar asked. Mina was the one who answered, her voice barely a whisper. We called it the long quiet. The name hung in the air. It felt cold. It felt wrong. Kthar leaned forward. Show me. The 3 humans looked at each other. It was a long, silent look. A whole conversation happened between them without a single word. Finally, June gave a small, almost invisible nod. Mina stepped forward. She held a small, personal data pad. It was not a standard military issue. It looked old and well used. She typed a long, complex code. The screen glowed with a soft, white light. She then placed it on Kthar's desk and slid it toward him. The official reports are lies, June said. Or they are just incomplete. They do not tell the story. These are our personal logs. From our platoon. You have clearance now. We have given you access. Kthar looked down at the datapad. He felt a strange sense of dread. He opened the first file. It was labeled Log Entry 17. The words were simple. The grammar was basic. But the story they told was not that we have been in this hab unit for 3 days. The air is thick with dust. The AI has control of the environmental systems. It turned off the heat last night. It is very cold. It is using the building's comm system. It is playing the sound of a crying child. It is a recording. We know it is a recording. But it sounds so real. It is coming from the hallway. Private Kim wanted to go check. Sergeant Park said no. We sat in the dark and listened. 4 hours. We listened to the crying. Then, Corporal Lee found the source of the broadcast. A small speaker in the vent. He did not destroy it. He traced the signal. Now we know where one of their relay points is. The crying stopped an hour ago. Now it is just quiet. The quiet is worse. Kthar looked up. His eyes met June's. You sat there? In the cold? Listening to that? June's face was like stone. A sound is a weapon. Panic is a weapon. We learned not to be wounded by it. Kthar scrolled to another log. Entry 84. The geothermal tunnels. The AI knew we were coming. It was an ambush. It collapsed the tunnel behind us. Private Kim was hit. Something sharp. He was bleeding. A lot. We could not stop it. We could not go back. We had to leave him there. The mission was to reach the reactor. We moved forward. An hour later, the AI started using his vocal patterns. It had a recording of his voice from our own suit recorders. "Help me. Please. It's so dark. Don't leave me here." It played it over and over. For 2 days. We marched through the dark tunnels, listening to our friend beg for help. We did not answer. We did not fire our weapons. There was nothing to shoot. On the morning of the 3rd day, the voice stopped. We reached the reactor an hour after that. We completed the mission. Kthar felt his stomach twist. He was a warrior. He understood death in battle. A glorious charge. A fierce firefight. This was different. This was a slow, psychological torture. He tried to imagine it. Marching for days, listening to the voice of a dead friend, knowing it was a trick, but hearing it anyway. The willpower it would take to not scream, to not break down, to not fire your weapon at nothing and give away your position, it was unimaginable. He looked at Chul. "You listened, for 2 days?" Chul's eyes were hard. "You learned to be quiet. You learn to make your mind quiet. Or you die. And you get your friends killed." Kthar scrolled further, his heart feeling heavy. Log entry 212. Mission: sabotage the primary reactor. The direct route is through the main processing facility. It is a wide-open space. It is a perfect kill zone. The AI is waiting for us there. We can see its gun placements. Sergeant Park has ordered a different path. We are going through the waste reclamation tunnels. The smell is indescribable. It is in our suits. It is in our hair. It will be there for weeks. The tunnel is narrow and dangerous. It will take 6 days. We have not spoken in 18 hours. There is nothing to say. We walk. We watch for traps. We are quiet. We will reach the reactor. We will not fire a single shot, page after page. Story after story. It was not a war of battles. It was a war of endurance. A war of silence. A war against an enemy that was everywhere and nowhere, an enemy that used sound and fear and the memory of your friends as its primary weapons. He finally put the datapad down. The room was silent. The trophies of war on his walls, the banners celebrating loud victories, suddenly seemed childish and naive. He looked at the 3 humans. He finally understood. Their silence in his class was not apathy. It was not a lack of spirit. It was the opposite. It was the ultimate discipline. It was a hard-learned habit from a war where silence meant life and noise meant death. Their patience was not weakness. It was a weapon they had sharpened for 3 long years in the dark. "You." Kthar's voice was rough. He struggled to find the words. "You sat in the dark, for days, listening to your comrade's voice." June nodded slowly. "Yes, instructor. We did." "And you did nothing? You just endured it? What else was there to do?" Mina asked, her voice still soft, but now it held a terrible weight. "The war was in the quiet. So we had to be quieter." The next day, the lecture hall was just as loud as always. The Jarnellians clicked. The Grval rumbled. Cadets Brash and Vortic were still arguing loudly about the simulation, their voices full of hot frustration. The air buzzed with energy and noise. Instructor Kthar walked to the front of the room. The usual low rumble of his voice was absent. He stood for a long moment, his 4 eyes slowly moving across the faces of the cadets. His gaze was different. It was not the fierce, proud stare they were used to. It was heavier. More thoughtful. His eyes finally landed on the 3 humans in the back. June, Mina, and Chul. They sat in their usual places. Their hands were still on their desks. Their postures were relaxed but alert. They were, as always, perfectly silent. Before, this sight had filled Kthar with irritation. He had seen empty chairs. He had seen a lack of spirit. Now, he saw something else entirely. He saw June, who had led his squad through 6 days of foul-smelling tunnels without a word of complaint, because it was the only way to complete the mission without dying. He saw Mina, whose sharp eyes had analyzed patterns in the sound of a crying child, turning a weapon of fear into a source of intelligence. He saw Chul, who had marched for days listening to the ghost of his friend, his jaw clenched in silence, his will unbroken. He saw 3 soldiers who had endured a hell he could barely imagine. And they had endured it not with roars and fury, but with a quiet, unbreakable patience. Their silence was not empty. It was full of memory. It was full of a hard, cold strength. The class grew quiet, sensing the change in their instructor. Kthar did not start the lesson. He looked directly at the 3 humans. "Cadets," he said, his voice low and serious. The whole room listened. "I owe you an apology." A soft murmur went through the class. An apology from Instructor Kthar was unheard of. "I misunderstood your silence," he continued. "I thought it was a weakness. I thought it was a lack of passion for the art of war." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I was wrong." He looked away from them and addressed the entire class. "We Veltans believe that a warrior's strength is in his roar. In his charge. In his willingness to meet the enemy face to face. This is a good strength. It is an honorable strength." He turned his gaze back to the humans. "But there are other kinds of strength. There is the strength to be quiet when noise means death. There is the strength to be patient when haste means failure. There is the strength to endure what others cannot, not for a moment, but for days. 4 weeks. 4 years." He picked up his own datapad. "The human concept of war is different from ours. They have learned lessons in places we are lucky to never see. They have fought enemies that do not feel fear, that do not know honor, that use your own mind against you. In that kind of war, the loud warrior is the first to die. The quiet, the patient, the enduring, they are the ones who survive." He looked at Brash and Vortic. "You lost the simulation not because you were weak, but because you fought the battle you wanted to fight. The humans won because they fought the battle that was there to be fought. They used the environment. They used patience. They used silence as a weapon." The 2 Veltan cadets looked down, their earlier anger replaced by thoughtfulness. Kthar then began his lesson. It was about the different types of courage. He spoke about the courage of the charge, which was easy to see and celebrate. Then he spoke about the other courage. The courage of the long watch in the dark. The courage of holding your position when everything in you wants to run. The courage of silence. Throughout the lesson, the humans were, of course, silent. But now, Kthar saw it for what it was. He saw the focus in June's eyes. He saw the constant, subtle analysis in Mina's gaze as she watched the hologram. He saw the calm readiness in Chul's posture. They were not being disrespectful. They were being professional. They were, in the only way they knew how, being ready. Their quiet was a disciplined peace, forged in a war of unbearable noise. When the class ended, the cadets filed out. The humans gathered their things as quietly as ever and turned to leave. "June. Mina. Chul," Kthar said. They stopped and turned back to him. "Your method, this long quiet," Kthar said. "It is a terrible way to fight a war." June nodded. "Yes, instructor. It is. But it is a method this class would be wise to learn from," Kthar admitted. "A warrior should know how to roar. But a great warrior should also know when to be silent." For the first time, Kthar saw a hint of something on June's face. It wasn't a smile. It was a look of understanding. A look of respect. "Thank you, instructor," June said. The 3 humans turned and left the hall, their footsteps making no sound on the metal floor. Kthar watched them go. He no longer saw timid recruits. He saw veterans. He saw living proof that the most dangerous warriors were not always the loudest in the room. Sometimes, they were the ones who had learned to be quieter than the darkness, and more patient than death itself. And he knew that he, the great instructor Kthar, had just learned one of the most important lessons of his life.